Well, be ready to be spooked because it's our Halloween special. Woohoo! Our guest today is Sarah Sedwick. Sarah, welcome to Art School Live. What are you
Thanks so
going to
much.
do today?
Well, I'm sorry I'm not in costume, Eric, but it's great to be with you today. And today I'm going to show how I begin a painting with freshness and energy because, probably the number one thing that people say when they come to study with me is I overwork my paintings, I paint too tightly, and I really want to loosen up my brushwork. And so today I'm going to show a little bit about how I do that, because I've spent a lot of time thinking and working on how to help myself loosen up and how to help other painters loosen
I
up
got to tell
their
you,
brushwork.
I am so looking forward to seeing this because this is something I fight. I think you and I have a lot in common in that is that you were classically trained. I was classically trained. And I was, we were having a dialogue about what realism is. And realism is representational. It can be tight, it can be loose, it can be it can be really loose, but it's not completely abstract. And so that's going to be really a good lesson for us today. Everybody, hang on. We're going to get right to Sarah in a second. Let's get started.
It's Art School Live with Eric Rhodes. Now, here's your host, Eric Rhodes.
Well, happy Halloween. I hope you like my costume. I'd like to see yours and tell me in the comments what kind of costume you're going to be wearing tonight. If, of course, some of you are in Europe or Japan or India or other places, so I don't know what you do over there. We'd like to hear about that. Our guest today is Sarah Sedwick, and she is an incredible painter, and you're going to get a chance to see her work. And of course, you'll get a chance to see how to loosen up a little bit. This is really nice. And she has a term, which I'll ask her to tell about in a minute, about the type of painting that she does, because she's come up with a new term for it. We have a prize for you today. If you leave a comment, and we'd prefer you leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from, you can win a pair of value specs. Value specs help you see values, whether you're experienced or you're just training yourself. It's a really good tool to kind of help. Let's see here. We have a free gift for you, and that is video 50. It doesn't have to be DVD. This shows a DVD cover, but we have it online. Free 50 top artists, 5 hours of video. It's called 97 Incredible Art Secrets. And you can download it immediately. Just go to 97artsecrets.com. If you want the DVD, you just got to pay the shipping. But you can, most people are going digital these days, and we certainly have. And so you have an opportunity to see some of the best that we've created. We do lots and lots of videos. If you want to subscribe to this program on YouTube, we would be appreciative. All you got to do is hit that subscribe button. Just go to YouTube and search Streamline Art or search Art School Live. I think we'll make that, say that in the future. And then if you would give us a follow, Eric Rhodes at Instagram, etc., that'd be really helpful. Okay, now coming up soon, just around the corner, like next week, is Realism Live. Sarah's going to be teaching there. We're going to tell you more about that in a minute, but let's get right to Sarah Sedwick. Sarah, are you ready?
I am.
Okay, take it away.
All right, great. So before we jump onto my canvas, I want to walk you through how I get my palette set up for a painting. I am what I like to call a pre-mixer, which means that I like to prepare my palette by pre-mixing some piles of paint specifically for my subject, which you can see over here, before my brush hits the canvas. Now, I do mix with the brush also. Generally, I'm doing that among these piles that I've mixed up in the center of my palette. First, I'll walk you through the colors in the outer ring, my tube colors, as I call them. So let's see, let's start up here in the corner. This is Titanium White Sunflower by M. Graham.
Why sunflower?
They just came out with this about maybe 4 or 5 years ago when they expanded their line. And they make a regular titanium white also. The vehicle for that one is walnut oil. But this sunflower one is supposed to be even less yellowing over time. Huh. It does still have that same beautiful creamy consistency that all M. Graham paint has. So it really feels identical to their regular titanium.
All right.
This is cadmium yellow, medium, Hansa yellow, yellow ochre. Okay. The rest of these are sort of mixed up things. This cadmium red light, alizarin crimson, Viridian from a tube here, ultramarine and ivory black from a tube. Those are my only tube colors. So it's a split primary palette plus yellow ochre and ivory black. And I have done a bunch of pre-mixing as well. This right here is a brown mixed from every pigment on the palette. I always do this. I make my own brown. I don't use brown from the tube very often. And this is a violet made from alizarin and ultramarine. Sometimes I use dioxazine purple, but not today. The rest of these things, oh, this is what is that? Raw sienna. And I'm going to block in my composition with the raw sienna. Sometimes I mix a color for this also, but today we're going to use a shortcut. And the rest of this stuff I have pre-made for my subject here. This lovely...
Sarah, talk to me about, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. Talk to me about this term, what you consider yourself to be. So
it's come up a bunch over the last few years. People will ask me, what do you call this style that you're painting in? What is this? And I did not have a name for it, and I had not even thought about it, aside from the fact that I'm a realistic representational painter. But since my goal over time has been to paint more loosely and to help other people do that too, I decided to call my style loose realism. And that is what I call it, loose realism.
Right.
And
I like it.
teach a workshop called Loose Realism also.
All right.
Yeah, we focus on loosening up. So here are my pre-mixtures. I made myself a nice orange just for the fun of it, because even though I don't have any orange in this still life, I probably will still want it to amend other things as I'm going.
What does that mean?
What do you mean?
Well, when you say to amend other things, if there's somebody here watching that might not understand why there's no orange in the painting, why would you use an orange?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so because it's a split primary palette that I'm working with, only reds, yellows, and blues, I don't have secondaries. And I know Viridian acts like a green, but I really think about it as a blue. And so this orange that I've mixed up, I will use to warm up my other mixtures if that's needed during the painting process. Warm up my greens and neutralize my greens if it turns out that my greens are too saturated when they hit the canvas, which usually is an issue that comes up with my pre-mixtures, that they're too saturated. I would go straight there and I wouldn't have to take that extra thought step of grabbing some yellow and some red. I've got the orange ready to go.
All right.
Okay, so here we've got what I like to call color clouds. You might have heard of color strings. Well, my palette has color clouds, and that means that I mix up some stuff for the lights and the darks for each of the hue families in my still life. So I have green limes, white garlic, light red, violet, negative space, and then cast shadows. And you can see that I've grouped them together. So here are the mixtures for my limes. I've got dark, medium, and light, and both warm and cool for the limes. This is a little more organized than I normally am, I'll admit it. Down here, I've got my mixtures for the whites, the quote unquote whites in my painting, mostly the garlic. Now, to paint white things, we can't just go straight here and then start changing it down from white. We need to start pretty far away from white. And what I will do is pick a complementary color pair. So orange and blue in this case. Mix a neutral, this isn't that neutral, it's pretty warm, and then keep lightening it and cooling it or warming it until I get a range of values that I can use to model the form on my white object. Why do I choose orange and blue as a starting point? Generally, I'm using very warm light on my still life, probably 2700 K light. And so that light looks peachy and warm. So I start with orange and blue to make those whites. And up here I have colors for my negative space. Negative space in the light, a few different options, cast shadows, and that's it.
All right, outstanding.
Okay, let's switch cameras.
Okay.
Get my nose out of the picture. You can still see my palette in the upper left there. And let's make the still life just a little bit bigger. I do also want to show you that before I created well, after I set up this still life, I did a quick, oh, it is not showing up. Okay.
All right.
I'll just show you. I did a quick sketch on brown paper. I do a lot of preparatory work for my paintings, and this is just a quick 5-minute sketch to plan out my composition and values.
Right.
And, the trick is not only making this value study before painting, but continuing to look at it. as you begin the painting. So I'm working on an 8x8 inch panel. It's a Raymar Panels Arches oil paper panel. So 8-inch square here. They're 58A Arches oil paper panel. And when I work on Arches oil paper, which I do, in loose paper form and on these panels, sometimes I'll tone it with a wash of Gamsol and pigment. But most of the time, I will just give it a quick wash with clean Gamsol because, even though it's treated to be able to be oil painted on just right out of the package, it's paper. It's pretty absorbent and dry feeling in the first pass. So I like to just wet it and wake it up just a little bit with some Gamsol. Now I'm going to take my number 2 round brush and some Gamsol and go into that raw sienna that I'm going to use for my block in, and using my thumbnail sketch and possibly also my viewfinder. I am working directly from life, by the way. If you'd like to sketch along with me, feel free to work from the photo on your screen. And I'm going to first look for landmarks. And what are landmarks? Those are the places around the edge of the canvas where objects are cropping, where things are entering and leaving the picture plane. And those are good places to begin when you're trying to move that beautiful still life composition you've come up with from the table to your canvas. And I know this is a challenging part. Now, setting up a still life is the most challenging and sometimes frustrating, maddeningly frustrating part of being a still life painter. It can be, I know. But planning your composition and then transferring that plan from your sketchbook to your canvas can be really a challenging thing. The great news is that it gets easier with practice, much easier. And I do a lot of painting planning, Eric. I do a lot of teaching now. I have not always, but in the last 8 years or so, really a lot more teaching. And it's been wonderful for me because it's really prompted me to delve into, not only how I do what I do, but why I do it that way, and also how to have more consistently successful outcomes.
Well, you learn when you teach.
Oh God, yes. And that's what I tell all of the artists that I mentor. Ooh, am I going to get that little guy in there? You know what? I'm going to make him a little smaller so he'll stay in. Artistic license, they call that. Yeah. All right. And that moved it down. Maybe I'll move everything up a little bit. I have the power. The underpainting stage, or the block-in stage, is my favorite stage of the painting process because everything's fluid, nothing is locked down, and you can really make a lot of changes and adjustments. Yeah, as you're doing your block-in. Once you start putting on color is really not the time that you want to be needing to make changes and adjustments. And so
get your drawing down early, right?
Exactly. And the willingness to adjust things in the early stages always results in a more successful painting in the end. All right. So now into that raw sienna that I began with, I'm introducing a little bit of that mixed up. Well, I guess I just brought in some alizarin crimson and some ultramarine blue. I could have grabbed my pre-mixed purple, couldn't I? Because this, I love the warm kind of golden underpainting that the raw sienna gives me. But sometimes it can start feeling overwhelmingly orange, too much orange, can't see what's going on. And so I will introduce another value by just bringing in a little bit of violet. You can block in a composition or do an underpainting in any color you want, really. And what color you choose will have a big and fun impact on the outcome, the resulting painting. It can really give a nice kind of glow underneath the opaque paint you're going to put on later.
So it looks to me like part of your process of loosening up has a lot to do with how you're being very loose in your underpainting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah. blocking in these rounded shapes with these geometric line segments, it not only helps me be more accurate when I'm doing the dreaded, well, no ellipses in this painting, luckily, but if I have ellipses, I always attack them, beginning with these geometric line segments and any rounded shape. I think it's strange, but they almost feel more natural and organic when they're blocked in these line segments. And, you know, there's another really good reason for keeping my strokes short when I'm drawing or blocking in. It's because, okay, so when you're beginning a painting, all the information that you need is in the still life, and almost none of it is on your canvas. And I've trained myself over time that every time my brush comes up from the canvas, my eyes will go to the still life.
Really?
If my brush is touching the canvas and moving, it's like having your foot on the accelerator when you're driving. You probably aren't going to take your eyes off the road. If my brush is touching the canvas and moving, I tend to be looking at my brush. As soon as the brush comes up, my eyes go here. Yeah.
Cool.
And that's where you want to be looking more.
Everybody's got one little, you know, you can watch this show every day. We've been doing it for almost, what, I don't know, 2 years, more than 2 years, 3 years. And every single day, somebody has something nobody else does.
Well, I think a lot of people probably do this. They just don't understand quite why. However, we can trick ourselves to just be looking at our subject a lot more than we think we need to or want to.
Yeah. Now, somebody pointed out this block-in method can be used for many mediums, not just oil.
Definitely, definitely. And if you are a mixed media person, you can block in with mixed media. Acrylic can go under oil and all kinds of, you know, I know people who like to do this with a colored pencil. High quality colored pencil is really just oil paint in a stick. And you could do that and then paint over it. All right, so I'm ready to begin putting on color. That's about it for my block in. And so the question comes up, where do you start when you go to put on color? I have all of these things pre-mixed, so I don't have to think about that. And where I want to start is, in this painting anyway, is with an easy win, something I think I mixed correctly and understand visually. Now, the issue, I would start with my main characters, probably, except the garlic is white and the canvas is still mostly white. And so painting white on white is difficult for a bunch of reasons. You know, there's nothing to judge those values against if you just launch in and start putting those really light value colors down. So I'm going to get a little bit of other color information on board for myself before I go into those guys.
Now, it looks like you're putting your lightest green in. Is that correct?
That's my lightest, most saturated green. And I like to start with more saturated colors and work toward neutrals. It just helps me judge the difference there. You know, I think a lot of painting is just this process of comparison and judgment, as negative as that sounds. But it is. It's doing one thing and then letting that decision influence your subsequent decision, one after another, until the painting is finished.
Everything in painting is about relationships.
Absolutely. I like that. So I didn't talk about my mediums at all. Right here, I have solvent-free gel by Gamblin. All my solvents and mediums are by Gamblin, and all my paint is by M. Graham. So solvent-free gel is my favorite medium of all time. This is walnut oil right here, or you can't see it, but it's just off the screen in a little jar lid, some walnut oil. That's not by Gamblin. And those are the two mediums that I use, and I have Gamsol also that I'm dipping into less and less as I progress into the later. Well,
where do you use walnut oil and where do you use your solvent-free gel?
Good question. Well, so I use them both in most of my paintings. If I had to choose one, let's see. If I was going to a desert island, I would probably take the walnut oil, but if I was going forever, but if I was just going to travel, like to teach a workshop, I would take the solvent-free gel because I don't need another container for it. It will sit right on my palette without falling off, and it flies very easily.
So you're using the gel, not the liquid, right? The solvent-free gel.
Yeah, the gel.
They make it in both.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I use it too.
Yeah, and both are good. Here's an example of me grabbing that orange that I mentioned earlier. What would I do with it? So this just feels too green, and I want to come into this reflected light and warm that up a little bit. Lovely. That's just what I want to do with that.
All right.
And
And there's a question about your brush. I can tell it's a Princeton.
Yes, it's a Princeton. It's an aspen. And the number rubbed off, but I'm pretty sure it's a 6 flat.
Yeah.
I really only paint, well, mostly anyway, with flats and mostly synthetics. I like the Princeton aspens very much. I also like synthetic mongoose, which not everybody makes. The ones I have currently are by Connoisseur, but they're wearing out and I got to find another supplier. I know Trekell makes, I think it's the Legion synthetic mongoose, which I also like. I would love them to make them in bigger sizes. So if you're listening, Trekell, bigger sizes on the Legion, please. But yeah, synthetic mongoose. And I also, let's see, I like the Princeton Summits as well for smaller size brushes. Yeah. I'm a synthetic person, and really, you know, bristles are wonderful too. I like Rosemary Ultimate bristles. They're my favorite, but you get such a different brush mark with bristle than you do with synthetic. And yeah, I don't know, because I like to mix paint with a palette knife. I don't need the muscularity of the bristle brush. And I also use pretty soft paint, you may have noticed. Yeah.
You soften your paint, or is it coming out of the tube soft?
It's mostly out of the tube, this soft. M-Gram is really a pretty soft paint. You know how oil paint has that range that it runs between sort of mayonnaise and toothpaste, right? Well, or worse, yeah. And I tend to be a mayonnaise girl. And M-Gram paint makes me really happy in that way. I use Gamblin paint sometimes. I find that to be a stiffer consistency. And anytime I encounter paint of any brand that's a slightly stiffer consistency, I will doctor it with a little bit of walnut oil right out of the tube before I even start mixing with it. Just loosen it up. Not to the point where it becomes translucent and runny, of course, but just to get that consistency that I love. I think a lot of artists who are earlier painters don't recognize how important consistency is, and they also may not recognize that consistency is not a matter of black and white, but it's personal preference. It's what suits not only your temperament, but also your painting style.
You, by the way, have a new book out. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, my new book is called Dynamic Still Life for Artists. The publication date is November 15th. You can pre-order it. It is full of beautiful art by, I think I have 17 wonderful artist contributors. Probably a lot of them have been on your show, Eric. Brian Mark Taylor, Todd Casey, you know, all still life art. And it's like a workshop in a book, Dynamic Still Life. I talk about still life setup. I talk about studio setup for still life painting. And then we go through my process of creating a painting plan. I talk about different ways to plan your painting, value studies of different types, both dry medium sketching and a value study in oils. And, you know, it's really for artists of all levels, I think. You know, it would be, my hope is that it's accessible to early painters, but also would have something for more experienced painters to enjoy. So Dynamic Still Life for Artists.
All right. So tell us what you're doing here.
So here, I'm always trying to work loose. And what helps me do that is to think working from the general to the specific. So big shapes, big brush strokes, maybe starting with a larger brush and working towards a smaller brush. Saving the details for last, because details don't create form. And what we're trying to do first and foremost is get the light side of an object and the shadow side of an object correct relative to one another, value-wise, which creates that illusion of round form on a three-dimensional form on a two-dimensional surface.
So I think one of the ways that I've heard described is to focus on, you know, think about baking a cake. Bake the cake before you put the decorations on.
Ah, I like that. Can I steal that?
I stole it.
Steal like an artist. Isn't that a book? Yeah. Nothing new under the sun.
Well, it's we go out plein air painting and we get totally enamored with something that's just really detailed, and we start putting that in first, and it just messes everything up. Got to get the form in.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the tricks for keeping your paintings looser is stopping working on any one area or object in a painting before it's finished. Getting yourself somehow to move on to another area of the canvas
Do you
before
have
you're.
a system for that? Something that alerts you to remember?
I need like a mechanical butt kicker just to sort of remind me. But it's a mental kind of kicking yourself mentally and saying, okay, no, don't finish it before you move on. A really good trick for reminding yourself of anything, just having like a painting mantra for your studio day, is get a Post-it note and stick it up next to your canvas.
One of the things that I do, I always have to remind myself to step back, which it's hard for you to do when you're doing on camera. But what I do is I'll put my paper towel in the back of the room sometimes. And that way, when I need to change my towel, I have to step back.
That is genius.
Well, that's embarrassing.
See, I'm learning more from you than you are from me today.
Not true. Not true. I want to encourage everybody watching to tell us where you're watching from. Got people all over the world tuning in. And we have a pair of value specs that help you see values that we're giving away today. And so you might want to win those.
Those are the ones with the red lenses, right?
Yeah. Cool. I used to hold up the red plastic, and then I didn't have a hand. So I keep them on my head when I want to evaluate my painting, my values, or I'm doing an underpainting. It really helps me. Even though I've trained my brain, I still get it wrong.
And probably a great conversation starter with all of those lovely spectators that we get when we plein air paint.
Do you do a lot of plein air?
No.
No?
I have. I've dipped enough toes in the water of plein air to know that I am terminally indoorsy.
All right.
Plein air painting, it's like a sport, especially in Oregon, where, we've got
rain.
Weather. Yeah, rain, lots of rain. A lot of people painting in their cars in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
Great.
Well,
that's
super
I get it. Brave. But no, I have done a bunch of plein air, and it's so challenging. And I don't know. I don't do it so much anymore, but I have had, when I did do it, I had the time of my life, especially doing paint outs events, not trying to win the prize money as much as trying to make connections, meet my art heroes, observe them in action. And I've gotten so much out of that.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy your podcast, and listening to all your interviews with plein air painters, even though I'm not such a plein air painter myself anymore. Nice. Okay. So one of the things that I'm always trying to do is push my color seeing, take some color risks. As long as you match the value relationships that you're observing, you're going to get form. And once you do match those value relationships, it's great because it frees you up to be a little bit experimental with your color, which I think we all want. We just don't know quite how to do it, or we're afraid to do it, and we need to figure out how to hack ourselves.
Well, one thing I'd like you to talk about when we're on that topic is the idea of color getting too garish and how you prevent it.
Yeah. So it can be difficult to tell. One thing I do is I try to start often with the most saturated colors in my painting, whether they're in the negative space or in the objects themselves, and work down toward the neutrals, because it's easier to cover really saturated colors with more neutral, darker colors if need be. So let's say I'm painting a lemon, I might jump out early with the lightest, most saturated yellows, probably out even beyond the contour line of my lemon. because I know I can cover those light saturated yellows with the darker yellows or with the colors I'm planning for my negative space. But vice versa might not work so well. It can be difficult to cover other things with saturated color. So that's one way that I keep my saturated colors clean. How do I stop things from getting too garish? You know, like I said earlier, my pre-mixed colors tend to sometimes be more saturated than they should be. And so part of stopping myself before I finish any one area of a painting and keeping on moving around the composition is pausing a lot to make those judgment calls. So I'll put a little bit of paint down and I'll say, all right, what do I think? And of course, I have to have some other things on the canvas to compare it to before I can make an effective judgment call there. But I put down a little bit of paint and then I stop and evaluate, give yourself that pause. I think that we sometimes just charge headlong into a painting, not really being aware of how many times we're touching the canvas in between trips back to the palette to get more paint, and then if you really examined how many times you are touching the canvas after each load up of the brush, are you petting the canvas like this with these wispy strokes and just sort of feathering everything around? I think you only have, after the brush comes off the palette, hopefully fully loaded with rich, beautiful paints, how many times do you think you're touching the canvas while you're actually putting paint down? Eventually, probably 3-4 touches of the brush. After that, you're not putting paint down, you're picking paint up and moving it around. You're mushing your beautiful loose brushwork away and you're blending all your values into a midtone. So really bringing in that awareness of how many times the brush is touching the canvas and reminding yourself to go back to the palette often to reload. So that solvent-free gel is so wonderful. It helps paint stick to other wet paint. That's why I love it so much.
So Sarah, I want you to take a break for a second and step away. Go get a glass of water or something, and then I'm going to come back. But tell us what you're going to focus on when we get back.
So I'm just going to keep attempting to move around the painting and work a little bit all over, but I am going to dive into that negative space and start revisiting the contour lines of my objects, but also just giving myself more values and colors to compare my objects in the foreground to.
All right, that sounds like a plan. So we'll be right back. Our guest today is Sarah Sedwick, and we are excited to have her. I hope you're learning something. It seems like the comments, a lot of people are learning a lot. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Eric Rhodes, the publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air Magazine. In case you're new, some of you have been here forever. We started this program when COVID began, and we thought it was going to run for a couple of weeks, and we ran 7 months, 7 days a week. To be there for you. And then we've continued 5 days a week since then. And so welcome today. Thank you for tuning in. We like to, this is kind of like an art education. One of the things about going to art school, which we clearly encourage you to do, but they have to kind of teach for the group, right? And so when you got 20, 30, 40 students, sometimes it takes a long time to get a concept. We try to give you concentrated learning here. Speaking of concentrated learning, we have an event coming up next week. It is 3 days with some of the world's top artists. It's called Realism Live. It's online, and this will be our 3rd annual, and it's different every time, different teachers every time, and we have some really incredible people, and I just want you to see this now.
Have you ever wondered how some artists get such realistic quality in their work? Unbelievably beautiful portraits, stunning figures, and realistic-looking still lifes or florals? Painting or drawing realism takes your work to a whole new level. Whether you want tight, carefully rendered realistic paintings, or looser, more impressionistic realism, most high-level artists will tell you that painting is a skill that anyone can learn. If you follow a process, you can paint beautiful, realistic artwork. But where do you learn? You could spend $3,000 or more to attend a live workshop or convention, or you can learn from the world's finest realists from home for a fraction of the cost. At Realism Live, the world's first virtual online realism conference, you'll get 3 days of world-class artists demonstrating their techniques and processes. This is a comprehensive conference covering all the subjects you want to learn in portraiture, figures, landscapes, still life, cityscapes, color mixing, and more. Taught by the world's leading artists. Not only will you learn their techniques, you'll have a chance to interact with instructors and get your questions answered. And you'll get to know other artists personally through our breakout sessions. And we'll even paint and draw together at the end of each day. Make new friends in our breakout sessions. Paint with hundreds of others. Get private access to our exclusive members group to become a part of our community. And learn to take your artwork to a higher level. Realism Live is 3 full days of painting and drawing instruction, November 10th through 12th. And for people who want to learn painting and drawing from scratch, start with our Beginner's Day 1-day atelier on November 9th. Soon you'll be painting faces, people, flowers, scenery, objects, and other subjects. You'll see your artwork improve faster as you learn from top artists and instructors from all over the world. Sign up today and join the world as we learn art together from these amazing artists. Glenn Vilppu, John Potoshanek, Alex Kelly, Ned Mueller, Terry Strickland, Dustin Van Welchel, Lisa Egley, Clyde Aspavig, Sarah Sedwick, Rose Franson, Chuck Morris, Michelle Dunaway, Michael Mittler, Daniel Graves, Leona Shanks, Alexander Shanks, Juliet Aristides, Carol Peebles, Tony Pro, Todd M. Casey, Cornelia Hernes, Sandra Angelo, Oliver Sin, Sharon Sprung, Mario Robinson, and Deborah Hughes. And it's hosted by fine art connoisseur and publisher Eric Rhodes and editor-in-chief Peter Trippi. And if you can't watch live, you can watch replays on your own time for up to a year. And it's 100% guaranteed. You'll be pleasantly surprised to realize just how much you can learn in such a short time. Realism Live, from the publishers of Fine Art Connoisseur magazine. Sign up today to reserve your seat now.
So there's a price increase coming up in 5 days. So you want to make sure you get booked. We thought because of COVID that our numbers would go down because of COVID being over. But in fact, they've gone up. So we're excited. A lot of people coming on. And so make sure you get signed up. And there's 100% money back guarantee. I don't like to do things the way I wouldn't want them done to me. And so if you attend, you watch the first day, and you don't feel like after the first day you got your investment for the full week, I'll give you your money back. Just let us know by the end of the first day. You won't get to watch the rest of it, but that's all right. You won't. It's not for you if you don't think it's good, but you will get a lot out of it. I guarantee it. Anyway, Sarah is back, and Sarah, I'm just curious, what are you going to paint on Realism Live?
That preview really got me pumped. I am going to be teaching during Beginner's Day at Realism Live, my first time ever doing the conference. I'm really excited. And what am I going to be doing? I'm going to be presenting my technique for painting with only 3 colors and white. I think that this is a fantastic tool for artists at any level, but particularly for beginners, just anything to simplify your palette and your color mixing. So I'm going to talk about how I get that palette set up to paint any subject, and then I'm going to take it for a test drive with a quick still life painting in only 30 minutes, start to finish. And I'm going to talk about how the timer is really an important part of my studio practice and my teaching, and how it can be part of yours.
You know, that's good because, you know, we can noodle things to death. That'll be good. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh,
okay. Your head is blocking. Oh, I see. Okay. There we go.
I was looking down at the palette.
All right. I'll let you continue on now.
Okay, great. I am just trying to keep myself out of detail-itis here and just keep moving forward with my painting. I did threaten you all with some work into the negative space. See, because I kept my quote-unquote white things so far away from titanium white in the tube, I don't have too much trouble going up to those highlights. The highlights are nice and peachy warm. Just some red and yellow added into that titanium white to get those beautiful highlights on the garlic. Maybe I'll make one a little more yellow than the others.
Now, will you try to say, okay, there's one piece of this is going to be my primary focal point, and then put more light or more color on that?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I'm thinking about when I'm doing a preparatory sketch like the one that I showed you for this guy is I am asking myself, what's my focal point? And until I'm clear on that, I kind of don't want to move forward into the rest of the painting. With this piece, my focal point is this guy, this head of garlic, and I actually haven't put that much attention into him yet. But what I really love is this little kind of stem and how it's coming up and overlapping the cast shadow of the lime that's behind it. So when I put in the darker value of that cast shadow, as I'll do a little bit, see, it's not green enough. It wants to be a bit more green and get some color influence from that lime.
All right. So just real quickly, I just want to remind people to leave a comment. Tell us where you're from. You have a chance to win a pair of value specs. I'd like to congratulate the winner from our last broadcast, which is Julie Roth in Jerome, Arizona, who won the easel brush clip. Congrats, Julie. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah. The easel brush clip.
Oh, they're incredible. They just, what I find is that first off, when I'm outdoors painting, I'm always dropping brushes. Yeah, and when I'm indoors painting, I have a thing with 1,000 brushes next to me, but I usually pull out 2 or 3 that I use primarily, and I put them in there at eye level in that clip, and that way I just grab those, and then I'm not wasting time sorting through trying to find it, because I lay it down. There's a bunch of other stuff there. I never can find them, so this is just an efficiency play.
Nice. I have a brush clip that I like. I'll have to show it to you after we go off the air.
Okay.
All right, so moving into the negative space. I'm going to save the bells and whistles for last. Actually, I think I want to really finish putting in this cast shadow of this garlic, which I did just mention is going to be my star player. So in the end, I will spend most of my refining time, which probably won't be too long, but what refining I do once I get the whole canvas covered will be in the primary focal area mainly. Yes, that will be my goal. And now I'm going to move in and do some work in the light negative space. So you see that I've kept my contour lines kind of loose. My shadows are sort of shaggy on the edges here. And that's because as I move into the light negative space, which I am going to do here pretty soon, I can firm those up, revisit them, and make them whatever shape I need them to be. Okay, so I have 2 colors in my light negative space. I have this sort of peachy yellow in the upper part. And any time that I have a flat, quote unquote, empty area in my negative space, I want to figure out how to activate that. Because if we just fill it all in with the same flat color throughout, it won't be very interesting, and it'll also flatten out any depth that I've managed to create. And even in a shallow space like this with only one plane behind the subject, I can still create depth, possibly by adding a temperature shift to that negative space. Maybe it's going to be cooler up here as I go back in the distance. I like that. Take that yellowish white and cool it off. See, I can firm up that edge, but keep it soft because it's receding. There we go. And then warm it up as it comes into the foreground. And I will also do a temperature shift from left to right, possibly, or maybe it's just a value shift, lightening up the paint a little bit as I shift across. See how it's just ever so slightly lighter? It's subtle, but your viewer's eye is really such a high-tech precision instrument that any just really subtle shift is going to be felt and appreciated by them, whether it's conscious or not. And as I'm painting around my subjects, really I'm trying to soften any edges without having to pick up a clean brush and blend to soften edges. That's not a good way to stay loose. So I missed that cast shadow piece. Yeah, that's a really good way to overwork your paintings, is pick up a clean, dry brush and start blending everything to soften edges. And so when I want softer edges, I try to do that with the paint by bringing two pieces of paint together and just sort of letting them combine. Maybe I overlap a little bit and sort of pull that out. Yeah, and maybe I want to leave the mess. So what I did not get here was this little piece of cast shadow that crosses into the light paint. Yes. Okay, and one of the things that I'm planning to do during Beginner's Day at Realism Live is a timed painting. So I'm going to do a painting, this is my plan anyway, in 30 minutes about, once I get my palette mixed up. And
so you're going to pre-mix it, or you're going to show how you mix it?
I am going to pre-mix it, and I am going to show how I mix it. Yes, definitely. And pre-mixing your paint colors helps you paint faster because, so if you mix with your brush, you're going to spend some time mixing. Yeah, but you're going to space that mixing time out throughout your entire painting process. It'll just be divided up and parceled out in small increments, but you're going to spend the same amount of time. The argument that pre-mixing is too time consuming, or the reluctance to engage in it because you just want to get to the painting.
Yeah.
Time spent mixing is time spent painting, and that investment of time up front saves us time during the painting process. And I can just let go and kind of paint more quickly, make more intuitive in the moment decisions, because I'm not having to go back to running that program of color mixing as often throughout the process.
Do you ever run out of piles of paint that
Yes.
you've pre-mixed?
Sure. And that's a great thing, because if you run out, that means, you mixed something correctly and it was useful. The problem I see happening a lot in my workshops is the thing you run out of first is going to be that thing that was correct and useful. And what students do, and what I'm there to catch them and stop them from doing in an in-person workshop, the tendency is, I've run out of this pile of paint that was working so beautifully for me. I'll just go next door and take the next closest nearly correct thing, which is not actually correct. And things go off the rails pretty quickly when you do that. So really, the work there is to notice that you run out of the paint, put down the brush, pick up the palette knife, and make more. And it's not easy to do. I think really lots of learning to paint is teaching ourselves to see like an artist, and it is also developing this awareness of what we're actually doing. We go into autopilot so often.
The great Ken Oster, it was the first workshop I ever took, and that's the first thing he taught me, is pre-mix your piles and mix more than you think you're going to need.
Excellent.
It'll save you so much time.
And are you a pre-mixer to this day, or do you?
No, I'm not.
You're totally a brush mixer?
Yeah, well, I'm not a very organized person. You seem to be very organized.
Yes, thank you. I like that.
No, I'm kind of a shoot from the hip kind of guy.
Mm-hmm. And that's a fun way to paint. It is a fun way to paint. And I am brush mixing. I'm brush mixing in between these pre-formulated piles, but I'm not having to go to the outer ring tube colors as much. It keeps everything harmonious. I'm really not cleaning my brush very much. Mostly I'm just wiping it off with this rag, and then I'm using the same brush for this entire painting, which I think helps me get more color unity, color harmony in my finished piece.
I tend to use one brush for most of my paintings.
Mm-hmm. With me, I get the argument for using multiple brushes, of course, but my problem is I would start out with the best intentions and then just forget and end up using the same brush anyway for everything. All right, let's stop painting the same area over and over again 800 times, shall we?
All right.
Anyway, okay, I have some edges that are problematic, but they're not so bad. Let's see. where should we go next? I started to talk a little bit about activating these empty areas. And the other thing that I want to be aware of in my negative space, and which my preparatory studies help me plan, is what I call my hot spots in the negative space. When I shine a light this bright on a low height still life like this, and this still life is only about 2 feet off the ground, you would think maybe you're not going to get so much light fall off on the ground, but you really do. There's a brightest spot on the ground, and I like to manipulate that to reinforce my focal point. So whether I see it or not, and I kind of do in this case, I am going to put my lightest spots, my lightest, maybe most saturated spots in the negative space around this guy, this garlic that I want to emphasize. Maybe I'm going to leave that.
Yeah, I probably ought to get to that because you're not going to be able to finish the painting and we've only got a few minutes left.
Bummer. But the good news about this demo, at least for me selfishly, is that now I am off and running. And that's one of the benefits of doing a quick painting or setting a timer, giving yourself a time limit, is that chances are when the timer goes off, you're not going to want to stop. So if you set out to do a 20 or 30 minute painting, you can do anything for 20 or 30 minutes, right? Often getting ourselves started in the studio.
I like this idea of daily painting. I think I'm going to start doing it. I know some of the Dreamliners are doing it now. And, it's just getting out there every day doing something, even small and quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really integrating it as a habit is fantastic. Such a good practice. Now, I really did daily painting for a bunch of years. It's how I got started in this deal, was daily painting. And I don't really consider myself a daily painter anymore. And having that kind of every day is a new beginning and trying all the different things, just if it looked like fun, I tried it when I did daily painting. And that was so freeing. It just really set me up for a winning attitude, not being too precious about anything, really just making work and habit the most important thing.
It's hard to find the time. I work out every morning and then I go to work. And so it's like, I got to get up an hour earlier to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can think of it like exercise.
Yeah, that's true.
But absolutely, finding the time to fit painting into your life is probably the main obstacle that amateur artists, student painters face for sure.
I'm going to ask you to put down your brush, come back on camera because we're running out of time and I just want everybody to be able to meet you.
All right. Give me 1 sec. Here I come.
Oh, I didn't have my mic on. I'm sorry. Our guest today is Sarah Sedwick. And Sarah, thank you so much for doing such a great and quick demo. And definitely you can see how to loosen up. That was very helpful.
Thanks for having me, Eric. This was a lot of fun. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you again in, a week and a half at Realism Live.
Absolutely. But quickly, tell me about your book.
Okay, so here is my book. Publication officially on November 15th, 2 weeks away. It's available for pre-order, and I believe they actually are shipping now, so it may come before the 15th. It is a workshop in a book, and it is full of beautiful art by friends of mine, all still life paintings, and lots of tips for setting up your studio for still life, lighting, etc. And my favorite chapter is the last part on motivation and starting.
Well, that's important. That's the hardest part of all. That should be the first chapter.
Right. And it's something I love to talk about. So probably going to have to write another book just to get all my thoughts out there.
Well, you will. You'll do another one. Sarah, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it. And thank you for doing Art School Live and for doing Realism Live, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. Actually, next week. So very exciting.
See you then.
Take care. All right. Our guest today, Sarah Sedwick, and we have a lot going on around here. We're going to be on more this week, but we also have Realism Live next week, and you want to make sure If you're not signed up, you got 5 days before the price increase. And so go ahead and get signed up, realismlive.com. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air Magazine. Please give me a subscribe on YouTube. Just go to Art School Live. And then if you give me a follow at Eric Rhodes on Instagram, that would be really, really helpful. All right. Have a terrific day and keep your head in the game. See you. Bye-bye.